So I thought we'd start doing some assembly on this Z80 starter kit, or Z80 starter computer, whatever it's called, the SD Systems, single board. The resistors, even though many of them, like all the 10Ks, were originally in the paper stripping to hold them together, the glue had failed, and I just had a bunch of loose resistors mostly. Some of them had managed to stay taped, and so I went ahead and sorted the resistors into values and just taped them down with just Scotch tape here to hold them in place. We've, of course, got the resistor assembly notes here. We've got 68 ohm. We've got 7 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up front, and the 68 ohms are sitting right here. So let's go ahead and remove these, and we'll see about soldering them up. So a couple of the others I've already peeled this kind of tape off of, and it seemed to peel off just fine. It doesn't feel like it's leaving a lot of glue residue behind, which would hamper soldering. I've looked at all the leads. They are not perfectly clean, but close enough. They are not all the same orientation. I would prefer them to all be the same orientation. Okay. I've measured the spacing, and it seems to be that the resistors are on 0.5 centers. I've got my lead forming tool here, and it's got a 0.5 spot in it. And it looks like R3 through R21, those there are all in this little section of the board right up here. The other thing to note is I put 4 legs on the board, and that way when the resistors are in, I can flip it over and solder easily. But this way the leads will just hang straight down through the board. So that's kind of nice. So let's see what we get here. We're just going to start with 1. That'll be R3. R3 looks to be right here. That's nice and centered. It went in very well. I'm going to grab a piece of blue tape just to hold that in place while I flip the board over. Flip the board over. He's right here. We will actually add a little bit of liquid flux just because the pads and the leads are really, old and very oxidized. But I think the extra flux will be more than enough to clean through this and get me a decent looking solder joint. So we'll find out. I've got the good soldering glasses on. Yeah, I'm happy with those solder joints. I don't know how well you can see them if the glare is getting in the way, but I'm happy with those. Those are absolutely fine. Let's see if we got any kind of flow up through the board, and we did. Got reasonable flow the other side, so I'm going to call that a success. So let's trim back the leads here, and we'll call that good. There's 1 resistor, and so let me form the rest of these, and we'll get them put in place. A little bit of flux. I'm doing my best here in the forming tool to hold the body of the resistor kind of centered in the tool so I have equal length of the lead to either side. It just looks a little neater that way. It's hard to do perfectly, although it might actually work better on this side. This side's got a narrower slot in the middle for the component body to drop into. So it might actually help keep things centered a little bit better. That's part of why there's so many variants of this. This has got a wider gap for a wider device, narrower gap for a narrower device, to kind of help keep it looking nice and neat. Just so it's said here, you've seen these online before, or in my videos before. I've collected a number of these over the years. These are all metric, although they can certainly be used. You know, for non-metric stuff, if you want to, you can definitely get close enough. I could be using this guy potentially. Well, maybe not. Definitely not that one. Probably the best one to use here is the one. Well, the best one to use here is the one I'm using. But so let's move on. We need to move to R6, which is right here. I want to make sure I keep the tolerance band orientation the same. So there's R6, R9. Luckily, these are all in the same general area up here. That made, at least for these, really nice. R12. There's obviously whatever. Oh, I bet these are segment drivers. There's 7 transistors, 4 here and 4 here, and the resistor networks. And I'll bet these are segment drivers for the displays. Because there's 6 total digits, and each is 7 segments, and there's 7 of those. So that's my guess what these are. R15 was right here. R18. And R21. Happy with that. Those feel just fine. They've turned out well. Having the legs on the back of the board holding the board up so the leads aren't, you know, pushing through and needing to be bent is nice. That way I can square them up a little nicer. There's going to be a fair amount of flux in the back of the board. That's fine. I'll just need to clean it. Hopefully my head's not getting too far in the way here. But I do need to be able to see what I'm doing. Always the challenge with working on camera. I'm sliding the side cutters down till I feel the top of the solder joint. Rather than flush cutting to the board, obviously. Should clean the tip. It's looking kind of grubby. Should really clean the tip every time it goes back into the soldering station, but I'm lazy and don't. There's enough oxidization on the copper, even though it's tin plated, and the leads at the tip is going to get grubby really quick. The flux helps loosen all that up so the solder has clean metal to bite into. And even though I'm using high quality flux core solder, for something like this I'm definitely going to add additional flux, just because everything is, like I say, fairly corroded. Well, there's no going back now. We've officially started the build for 7 resistors. Hopefully those are showing up well. I've got, in this case, the tolerance band off to the left. Leads all formed with the lead forming tool. There's a look at the solder joints. I'm inspecting them as well. They all look good to me. So that really is, I think, the first set of resistors in. So the build is underway. Ooh, there's some scratches here. Where did those come from? I don't remember those. Well, it's not something I did. You noticed or not, but I saved all the 10k ohm resistors for last. There was 29 of them. They were by far the most resistors. I worked my way through all the smaller counts intentionally, and the assumption now is any place there's a resistor left on the board, it should be a 10k. But even with that assumption, I'm going to confirm that it makes sense, and that's what I did here. R1, R7, R10, R1, see there's R4, R7, R10, 13, 16, 19, 13, 16, 19, and I've got 25 right there. So I've confirmed those are all 10K. The idea being that I'll stuff those, I'll mark them off, and I'll work through another batch till I get through all the 10K. So that's what's going on here and why I chose the order I did. Okay, with the 10k ohm resistors, 50 56, 58, 59, 56, 57, 58, 59, all in. We'll need to solder those up, and R47 is the one I've missed. So the interesting thing on these is the fact that this power rail right here, which looks like it's probably +5, it's probably 8 pull-up resistors here, although there's 10 resistors. They may be pull-ups or pull-down, I don't know. But they're tied to a common point here, and so I need to solder those all kind of at one time for this really to work. Otherwise the solder would be flowing over other holes and blocking, and it would just be a big mess. So let's go ahead and see about soldering that up. So I'm going to start on this side. These pins are all individual. They are on 0.1 centers. I'm going to go to a smaller tip. Let me see if I can find a tip I'm happier with here. This one should work. So I had a fairly large tip on there before. Really larger than it needed to be for what I was doing, but it was the tip that happened to be on there. So this is a much smaller. And let's go ahead and see if we can solder up each one of these. I need the better glasses for this. I really need to be able to see what I'm doing because they are spaced so tight. One, two. I don't want any bridges here, obviously. Hopefully my big old head's not in the way. In other videos, you've seen me put every other resistor in, solder, trim the leads, and then the remaining resistors in, and I probably should have done that here, but I didn't, and I'll just work with it the way it is. Hopefully, again, my head's not too much in the way. Glasses I'm currently wearing are 3.5 diopter. They're pretty powerful, which means I got to be pretty close to actually see what I'm doing. Oh, come on. So close together, I was having a hard time getting the tip of the wire cutters down into place. So how to approach that? Because they're all on a large copper pour. And basically all want to be soldered at the same time. I'm trying to think of how I want to approach this. What I may do here is pre-cut these. And pre-cut these. And I'm just cutting them to the thickness of a printed circuit board, essentially. Probably a little bit taller than I would typically have a trimmed lead, but in this case, that works well. And now I can just go ahead and flux that up well. And solder. And the question here becomes, so on this side of the board they're individual pads, on the other side they're that large pour. So it'll be interesting to see how well this actually flows through into that large pour on the other side. Actually soldering up just fine. My JBC pencil does have a real high thermal capacity and deals with this kind of stuff really well. Your mileage with your soldering hardware will vary. You know, but But that's part of the secret is getting to know your tools well, what they can and can't do. So none of it on this side soldered through to the top there, although there's a couple of bridges back here. They don't matter, because again, they're all actually tied together in that common pour. I think that's okay. It's good enough. So we've really got one resistor left to find, and that was that R, I believe, 47. R47 is the last of the 10Ks. I've been pretty lucky on this board in that the resistor numbers have been pretty common. R1 to R12, 13 to 21. They flowed pretty well. And then there was a few that jumped out that weren't. There's 49 right there. There were a few that they got down and then I think added a couple of resistors. And so it kind of broke a little bit the pattern, but it was close enough. It was really pretty easy to deal with. So let's look for a resistor outline that isn't stuffed, or the letters 47 someplace. 45, 46, 43, 44, 48. I would expect to find it around here, but as I said, 49 suddenly appears up here. So where is 47? That's a capacitor. Hopefully, well, since I counted the resistors, they matched exactly the list here. There was no extras or missing in the kit. So there it is, right there, R47. So see, I was confident I hadn't put the wrong part necessarily in there. You probably did see in the sped up video where I got R34 and R43. I put R43 in the R34. I just transposed in my head 34 to 43. Which is fine, such is life. But this actually then is the last resistor. Seems like I can get the lead to take some solder. So I'm not unhappy with the soldering job. I've done better, I've done worse. But that does get me then R47, which completes the 10Ks, and that is all the resistors. So we'll get up here, try to get you a look. There's a lot of flux that's flown through onto this side of the board. It is what it is. They're fairly well lined up. I mean, they're obviously hand installed, weren't machine installed. They'd be cleaner, but you know, they are what they are. There's 3 here, 5 down here, 5 over here. So not too god-awful bad. Hopefully this is focusing and you're not getting too much glare. But there it is. We've mounted up our resistors. So we're on our way with the build. So if you got this far in this video, thank you. I would guess most people have bowed out by now, but that's okay. I'll see you in a future video.